What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another page of the playbook. This is Nate coming at you guys. Team number 2, off-season grades. Today we're talking Atlanta Falcons, who have been just the talk of the town this offseason. Atlanta said, you know what, we want to be talked about, and wow, did they sure do that. So, Atlanta, let's look at last year before we dive into everything that they've done this offseason. Before we get into today's video, guys, I just want to give a special shout out to today's sponsors, starting with Gold Fine and Bowles, lawyers for the injured. Personal injury, workers' compensation, those are their two things, but any sort of legal advice, they're the people to call. Give them a phone call, 309-673-5144. Tell them we sent you, okay? And I'd also like to shout out SeatGeek for sponsoring today's video as well. Use promo code PlaybookSports on their website to get $20 off your first purchase of $30 or more. Let's get back to the video. Obviously, a super frustrating year for them. I thought they could be decent, except I was always worried about the quarterback position. I knew Desmond Ridder wasn't in. Taylor Heineke wasn't the guy. I do not like Arthur Smith as an offensive play caller. I just don't. Benched Bijan for a game, gave him one touch, and then done the rest of the day. Just refuses to get the ball to his star players. It just doesn't make any. And then he gets mad at fantasy sports. I just didn't get it. Don't like him. Sorry. Glad he got canned. They wanted Desmond Ridder to be the guy. Obviously, he was not the guy. He's been dealt, no longer there. So they entered this offseason with a huge, a glaring hole at quarterback. Let's talk coaching staff. Obviously, Arthur Smith was relieved of his duties, along with offensive coordinator Dave Reagan. Coaches hired. Raheem Morris is the new head coach, defensive guy from the LA Rams. I like that hiring a lot. I do think he can build a strong defense. What can he do on the offense? Well, hopefully he won't have to do a ton as the offensive guy, because that'll be offensive coordinator Zach Robinson's job, who followed him over from LA. I like the hiring. I really do. I think Raheem Morris can be a solid coach. He's one of kind of the hot candidates this offseason, and the Falcons get him. Should be able to build a pretty good system there, so we'll see how that goes. Free agency losses. Not much. Really, not much. Again, they let tight end Jonnu Smith walk in free agency, which was a good decision, strictly because they've got Kyle Pitts there. Don't need to keep Jonnu Smith around. And then traded away quarterback Desmond Ridder to Arizona for Rondale Moore. You'll notice Desmond Ridder was not considered a key piece of addition for Arizona in yesterday's video. But getting Rondale Moore, I think, is actually a pretty good addition for Atlanta. Just kind of another guy in there who can be shifty with the ball in his hands. So I like that trade for Atlanta. Kind of an addition by subtraction of Ridder as well. Free agency additions. They made the splash move to start off free agency. Kicked it off. Moved quickly to sign the best available QB, Kirk Cousins. Signed him to a 4-year, $180 million deal. Kind of has an out after the second season, so it could just be a 2-year deal. But no one's thinking that was what they were going to do until the draft night came around, which puts them in a predicament. We'll talk about it. Also signed receiver Darnell Mooney to a pretty good-sized deal for him, too. 3 years, $39 million. I was kind of shocked by the amount of money Darnell Mooney got. But altogether, a good move. And then I like some depth pieces like defensive tackle Eddie Goldman and cornerback Kevin King. Just bringing in some depth pieces, some guys that can help kind of teach the young guys the system and get everything going. I like the additions that the Falcons made in free agency. I thought that it set the table for best defensive player available in the draft. I thought for sure it was going to be a defensive lineman. They need an edge rusher. You look at their depth chart, and their best edge rushers are Arnold Ebiketie and someone else whose name escapes me at the time. I just talked about it, so that's annoying that I can't think of it. It'll come to me at a random moment. But let's talk draft. I'm honestly getting sick of talking about Atlanta's stupid draft because it didn't make any sense. So let's just talk about it and get it out of the way. Michael Penix at pick number 8 was shocking. Genuinely shocking. One of those moments where it's like, what? Go watch our draft, and if you just fast forward to you'll know when they announce it, because we all freak out. Because first of all, Addison called it, and then they actually made that pick. It just didn't make any sense to me then, and it doesn't make any sense now, a couple weeks after the draft. Either they scouted him too late after they'd already signed Cousins, or maybe they thought they'd be able to trade down and get him later, and nobody was jumping up, so they're like, well, we got to take him now. I don't know what happened. I wasn't in there. What I do know is that they drafted a 24-year-old QB coming off of several season-ending injuries in his entire career, and they're not going to be able to play him because you cannot not start Kirk Cousins. You just can't. Kirk Cousins is going to be ready for the season. When he's physically cleared, you have to play him because you're paying him so much money. And so you're wasting a couple of the cheap years of Michael Penix, and also as he's approaching his prime already. Again, I'll talk more about that as we get towards the end and I offer my final grade for them, but I just don't know what they're going to do, man. I don't know what they're going to do. Second round pick, Rook Ororo, defensive tackle out of Clemson. Bit of a reach for me. I had him more of like the 45 to 55 range, and they took him at 34, 35. Took him early in the second round. I think it was pick 35. And I like Rook. I do think he's good. I think Jerzon Newton has a chance to be an amazing defensive tackle, though. And there's just no real reason in my mind why Rook was taken over Jerzon Newton. I'm not quite sure what Raheem Morris and Terry Fontenot saw there that made them go with Rook instead of him, but I'm not in the room. I just thought it was a bit of a stretch. I have him, but I had Rook behind Jerzon Newton, T'Vondre Sweat, and Braden Fisk. I had all three of those guys ahead of him on my defensive tackle rankings, and they took him over him. Maybe their rankings are just a little bit different. That's okay. Everyone's a little bit different, right? And then I did like their third-round pick, Braylon Trice out of Washington, edge rusher. They could have gotten a much better edge rusher at pick 8, like Leatu Latu, but I digress. Braylon Trice, very productive at Washington, not the best athlete. Fell down boards strictly because he's not the best athlete. Early in the mock draft season, he was considered a first-round pick. Fell all the way to the third because he didn't test great at the combine. Whatever. Who cares if he doesn't test great at the combine? The guy did it on the field. So I really like that pick. And then I also like the pick Brandon Dorlus in the fourth round, defensive lineman out of Oregon. I think he can also be a regular for them. And I know this is a stupid comparison just because he's a smaller defensive tackle, but some of his film looks a little Aaron Donald-ish. And that's where Raheem Morris is coming from. So he's going to try and probably mold him and Rook into that Aaron Donald type of defensive lineman, which is obviously not going to happen, more likely than not. But I see the vision, right? I see the vision. And I think that both Dorlus and Rook are going to get a ton of snaps on the defensive line. So, draft grade. I feel like the Falcons didn't have much of a game plan here. I feel like they felt like they had certain guys that would fall to them that didn't fall to them, and they panicked. I don't know what happened. But just because they didn't go consensus with every pick doesn't make them bad picks, right? I think Rook Ororo can be a very good defensive tackle. I think Michael Penix was probably the fourth best quarterback in this class. I like him a little more than McCarthy personally. But I just don't like where they were drafted. So for draft grade for Atlanta Falcons, I'm giving them a C. Overall this offseason, I like that they fired Arthur Smith. I think that was the right move, and I like who they replaced him with in Raheem Morris. I really do. They obviously identified quarterback as a key weakness on this roster, but they did some overkill. You did not need to do everything that they did. They spent so much of their resources on quarterbacks this year, multiple quarterbacks. I thought it was a good signing. Kirk Cousins, perfect quarterback, done. You can take a guy later in the draft if you want to find a developmental piece, a young guy. They didn't do that. They drafted an older quarterback prospect. Here's a scenario I see in my head, Falcons fans. Tell me if I'm wrong. In 2 years, right, Kirk Cousins has played great football for you guys. He's gotten you to the playoffs at least once, maybe won you a playoff game or two. Michael Penix is now 26, and you have a potential out in Kirk Cousins' contract. What do? Are you going to cut Kirk Cousins, who just won you a playoff game? Maybe made it to the divisional, God forbid, the championship round. I doubt a Super Bowl's in their future, but, showing that the team is good enough to make a little bit of a run. Are you going to cut Kirk Cousins then and start Michael Penix? Because at that point, you're already 2 years into Penix's career. He's 26 years old at that point. It is time to decide. You cannot just continue to sit on him and wait and wait and wait. That's best case scenario. They have to make a really hard decision of cutting the aging guy who's played well or play the young guy that they wasted the number 8 overall pick on. That's a decision I feel like they didn't need to have to make. They didn't need to put themselves in this position, and yet they did. So I don't like that, but I like their moves. I like their free agency period. I thought they made some pretty savvy moves to bulk up the team. I don't think this roster was bad coming into the year last year. I just think they had terrible quarterback play. Good quarterback play will change things. With a good offensive coordinator and Zach Robinson, and a new head coach, I don't think the Falcons are going to be bad. I just do not understand the Michael Penix pick at pick number 8. I simply don't get it. So for that reason, I'm giving them a final grade of a C+. That feels like it might be a little bit harsh, but that's just because I don't think that they had a game plan for this draft. I think they went into the draft and they're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then they're like, just kidding, we're going to do this. I don't know what happened. I wish so badly that videos of all of the draft stuff came out so we could see what was going on in that room, because it just felt like there was darts being thrown at a wall and they're like, yeah, we're going to do that. So C+ for the Atlanta Falcons. That's all I've got for you guys on day 2 of 32 NFL offseason grades in roughly 32 days. Who knows, we may miss a day or two here. Don't tell anybody. But that's all I got for you guys. We'll see you guys in tomorrow's episode where we will talk about the Baltimore Ravens.